So let's talk about the story of Link's Awakening. There's not that much here to really talk about, but I would argue that this is the first Zelda game to have like a real story to it. In fact, I would actually argue that it's one of the few Zelda games that have a real story to it, even counting later games and even some of the 3D games. Because really, most of the time, a lot of Zelda games don't really have very much of a story. It's just like, go save the whatever, and then you go on an adventure. And it's just a bunch of things that happen along the way. But in terms of like actual narrative storytelling, not a whole lot happens most of the time in many Zelda games. However, Link's Awakening, there is a little bit more here than most Zelda game stories, which is why I'm talking about it. Now, on the onset of things, it kind of does seem like Link's Awakening is just another game that's just setting you off on a big adventure. The general premise of Link's Awakening is that Link was sailing around and he ended up getting caught in a storm, and somehow through those events he ended up trapped in the dream of the Windfish, which is a giant magical whale thing that has been trapped sleeping for a very long period of time, and Link somehow gets pulled into the Windfish's dreams, and so now he has to figure out a way to wake the Windfish up to get both him and the Windfish out of this situation. And that's pretty much it in terms of things relevant to the plot of what happens here. And then Link goes on an adventure and he wakes up the Windfish and adventure over. Pretty unsubstantial as a story goes, and not a whole lot more than you get in most Zelda games, but a story is not just about the literal things that happen in it, the plot points, the events that occur. A story is about how it conveys these ideas and feelings and themes that it is trying to communicate to the audience, and that is where I think Link's Awakening shines. Because through that simple premise, they managed to have a fairly nice little story here that explores a very simple thing, just like a feeling that every single person has gotten at one point in their life at some time or another, and it's all baked into that idea of the game being a dream. Because this is not a, oh, it was all a dream all along kind of thing where you figure that out at the end and you realize that everything that happened through the game was pointless. That's not how Link's Awakening operates, not at all. You discover partway through the game that you are inside a dream and that you are trying to wake yourself up. That is treated as a twist at that point. The way the game presents itself, it makes it seem like after getting caught in the storm, Link just wakes up on the shore of Koholint Island and he has to figure out a way to get off the island. And it's as you get further into the game that you start to realize that this is all just a dream and none of this is actually real. However, that twist is not simply meant to be some revelation that comes partway through the story and makes you go, oh wow, I can't believe this was all a dream. There is something more significant to that, and it all revolves around the character of Marin. She is really the focal point of the story here, despite being such a simple little character with relatively little screen time. So let's rewind a bit. Let's just forget about all that Windfish stuff and that Link's in a dream. Let's just go with how the story is presented to you at the beginning. Link gets cast away on this unknown island where he is discovered by a young girl named Marin, and she takes him back to her house, where eventually Link wakes up and he realizes that he's stuck on some island in the middle of nowhere, and he has to get off this island to continue doing whatever he was doing at the beginning of the story, going somewhere, sailing to some destination. It doesn't really matter. However, Link quickly learns that getting off the island is not going to be a simple task, and so he's going to be here for a while as he tries to figure things out. And because of that, he ends up getting acquainted with the locals of Koholint Island. There's a little town here with a couple of people that live their lives, and of course there is Marin, the girl that discovered Link. Naturally, Link, and by extension the player, are going to gravitate toward Marin more so than the other townspeople because she was the first person that you encountered at the beginning of the game. She's your touchstone, you know, she's the person that cared for you after finding you shipwrecked. So obviously she is a good person, plus you meet her father Tarin, who's a very goofy little character, and so, you know, with the interactions with these two that you get at the very beginning of the game, you very quickly realize that these are supposed to be good people, and so obviously they're the kinds of people that would be willing to house Link during his stay here on Koholint Island, and so it just makes sense that you would end up being very inclined to liking Marin as a character. The whole thing is very well done and very well orchestrated here. That's not to mention that, of course, Marin is a very cute character, especially once you start actually talking to her and you discover that she likes to sing, and then you can, as the player, sit there and listen to her sing her song, and, you know, there's a very nice little feeling about that. You got this nice, sweet, cute, innocent girl, and she just really enjoys singing, and she likes to sing for other people in order to make them happy and all that, you know? Very, very appealing stuff. They definitely made an effort to make Marin as appealing as possible to great success, in my opinion. And this is very important because Marin is used as the primary method to explore what this game's story is really about, and that's really only gonna work if the audience really likes Marin. And in reality, there's not really that much to Marin as a character. You don't even really interact with her that much throughout the course of the game. Link's Awakening is a fairly story-light game overall, so within a very, very condensed amount of time, you have to try to get the audience to like and care about Marin, to understand what her deal is, and to start getting the player to feel the way you want to about her. And I think they managed to do all of that really well, despite all of the issues that come with that kind of thing. It starts when the player gets the ocarina, and now they can take it to Marin and learn the song that she's been singing this whole time. And that's just a nice little lovely experience to share with Marin, that she loves to sing so much, and now you have this instrument, and now she can sing along with the player as you play the ocarina, and so you have a little moment there where you and Marin connect through something that you both mutually enjoy. It's a small little thing, but it is a significant moment that helps add to that feeling of connection the player has with Marin, which is very important. But the real moment where Marin starts to really work as a character is when you get to the animal village, which is a thing in this game because it's a dream, so there's a bunch of weird stuff, like a bunch of talking animals and all that. Lets this game have a unique little aspect to it that other Zelda games don't, which I think is pretty nice, but more importantly, when Link gets to this village, he realizes that he is going to need Marin to help him continue forward, as the animals love listening to Marin sing, and once again, that's just another thing that adds to Marin being an appealing character. Just imagining that image of her singing with a bunch of animals all around listening to her, and this all, you know, cartoony, lovely little feel to it. They are really, really laying this stuff on thick with Marin, and I think that it works for the most part. And then you get to this point in the game, and you have to go find Marin, so you go back to the village, but she's not in her usual spot. Where is she? This is a really effective moment where the game makes you feel like you've started to get to know Marin, because earlier in the game you can learn that Marin likes to go for walks on the beach and spends a lot of her time there, and so naturally you come to the understanding that that's probably why she found you washed up on shore, because she was doing one of her walks on the beach and that's where she saw you. And so if she's not where she normally is, then perhaps she's over by the beach, and oh, look at that, she is! Again, small little simple things like that are very, very effective here, and then this leads to the scene with Marin. And this is where we discover Marin's main deal as a character, which is that she has spent her entire life on Koholint Island. She's never been anywhere else. She's never seen what's out there beyond the ocean. You can't just leave Koholint Island because of some magical stuff going on here that prevents that, and so Marin's never been anywhere else, and she really wants to. She wants to see what's out there, what exists beyond just this tiny little island. And so, when she discovered Link, Marin was extremely excited because for the first time in her life, she had encountered something from the outside world, which for one just confirms that there is actually something out there beyond Koholint Island. There are other people out there, there are things to see, which just makes her desire to get out there even greater, and she wants to know about Link and where he's from and what he's experienced, what's out there in the world. And then the scene ends there. Obviously, Link cannot speak, and so he doesn't really respond to her in particularly strong ways, but you as the player definitely do. This is something about Link's Awakening story that I think is extremely effective, because Link is like a non-character. He's just a blank slate nothing for the player to insert themselves into. And so when you're inserted into Link's shoes in this situation, naturally you're just left to think, what a perfect scenario here. I've been shipwrecked on this island, and I'm currently working to get off of this island, and here there is some girl that I quite like and am very fond of, and she wants for nothing more than to leave this island and go on an adventure and see what's out there. Well, perhaps maybe when I beat the game, I can take her with me, maybe, huh? That seems like everybody would benefit. And of course, Marin and Link at this point have already had a little bit of connecting and bonding with each other, and so it all just kinda, yeah, that seems really nice now, doesn't it? The player in the shoes of Link starts to think, yeah, I think that I could definitely spend a lot of time with Marin, showing her what the world is like. Yeah, that sounds very nice. And this is what it was all for. This is why Marin is such a cute, appealing character. She has this air to her that almost makes her seem almost like the ideal girl in a certain way. You know, she is grade A waifu material, and that was all very intentionally orchestrated to get the player to start thinking these kinds of things. And what's so impressive about how this was done is that none of this is actually in the game story. Link doesn't respond in any way to Marin because he's Link. He doesn't do anything, he doesn't say anything. He doesn't really show any particular fondness for Marin because he doesn't show any particular anything for anything. So these ideas of how nice it would be to take Marin with you on your adventure, that is entirely born in the mind of the player. The game did not tell you to think this or feel this. And yet, the player is naturally inclined to have these sorts of feelings toward Marin. This is the real show that their characterization for Marin was extremely effective, because with so little material to work off of in terms of knowing her and building your relationship with her, it works. It manages to get the player in the headspace that the game developers want you to be in. Honestly, I think this whole deal with Marin up to this point is extremely well done and effective, a great demonstration of what minimalism can do. Just the absolute bare minimum elements that are necessary to get you to connect and care about Marin, and just the presentation of a scenario that inclines the player to feel a certain way, and that's all it takes to get the player on this kind of thought process. There is also a small amount of implication of maybe some romantic interest between Link and Marin, obviously, but it's very, very little because overall this game has very little to its story. Most of it exists in the player's head. And then this is all reinforced toward the end of the game where there's this scenario where Marin is in danger. And what are you, the player, what is Link going to do about this situation? Of course, you save Marin and get her out of trouble, and of course she is very grateful about that. And then she's about to say something, but then Tarin shows up and interrupts her, and, you know, your mind as the player is just going crazy about what she was about to say. The things you've been thinking about with Marin, perhaps she's also been thinking about them as well. Perhaps she was about to ask if you could take her with you. Or maybe she was going to tell you about the feelings that she's been developing. Oh, ho, ho, ho. This connection between Link and Marin, it's just so nice, so lovely. It has this almost perfect feeling to it. The scenario is just so convenient that Link ends up on this island where he meets this girl who wants to get off the island with him, and they both connect with each other. They both enjoy each other's company. They're both around the same age. Marin is, of course, a very, very cute girl. It's all just so ideal, so perfect. It almost seems like it's too good to be true. And this is when the game starts to reveal what's really going on here, and the fact that none of this is real and that Link is just in a dream. It teases this multiple times throughout the story of the game as you get further and further. It hints at it a little bit here and a little bit more there, getting slightly more explicit the further and further you go, until you get a decent way through the game and it just flat out tells you that this is a dream and none of this is real, and in order to get off of Koholint Island, the only way to actually do it is to wake up the Windfish. But doing that is going to make Koholint Island and all of its inhabitants disappear, as all of these are just part of the dream. And once again, the game doesn't tell you what to think here. It doesn't tell you how to feel. It doesn't present to us what Link's feelings are. It just leaves it at that, but you as the player very quickly come to the realization, wait a minute, if I wake the Windfish, then that means that Marin is going to disappear. She's not actually real, she's part of the dream just like everything else. And so a slight feeling of dread starts to creep in around the idea of completing your adventure and waking the Windfish. The game does an incredibly good job of putting you in Link's shoes. Like, damn, this is so well done. For such a simple, primitive little game as a Game Boy game like this is some grade A storytelling right here, genuinely. I also find this game's story to be an excellent example of how well a story can work even if it presents you with a scenario that you may not have personally experienced, or might not necessarily be representative of who you are as a person. I'm not Link, I'm not romantically interested in Marin. I find her to be a compelling character, but that's obviously a totally different thing. However, in the context of the story, and me as an audience member, I am putting myself in Link's scenario. When you're a young man that's been adventuring all on your own and you end up in this situation where you meet this girl that's very, very attractive and you have this connection with her, and you find that she wants to leave the island and you were already planning on doing that yourself, it just kind of naturally leads to these thought processes. And so for the purposes of the story, I'm not me, I'm looking at it from Link's perspective here, which I think is really cool. You know, a lot of games, especially RPGs, they lean on this idea of you inserting yourself into the story, and that can definitely be effective in its own way, but I much prefer something like this, where it allows me to have an experience that I am never going to have in my real life. It takes you on a journey outside of your own personal experiences and enables you to become multiple different people. When you're playing Link's Awakening and you're engrossed in the story, you are, for all intents and purposes, Link. You are a young man that is feeling like you want to sweep this young girl off her feet and show her an exciting life of adventure. You know, that's why Link's name is Link. He is the link between the player and the game, and no game shows that better than Link's Awakening. Link is not just a blank, empty avatar for the player to control when playing this video game. Link is who the player becomes while they play this video game, and so they see the story from Link's eyes. So while the game itself doesn't imply that Link is thinking these things, you know that Link is because you are thinking these things while you play through the game. It is so cool and so extremely well done, and it makes the story of the game that much more compelling because you are an active participant in the story. You're not just an audience member that's having everything fed to you, you are providing a bit of the story to make things work, because as you get later into the game, once you've already discovered that this is a dream, some of the enemies and bosses, they taunt you by saying, you know, if you wake up, then everything is going to disappear. And that is specifically meant to get under the player's skin, because it's to remind you that if you succeed at your mission, then Marin is going to go away. That would not mean anything to the player whatsoever if not for the fact that the game knows that you don't want that to happen, even though the game has not told you to feel that way. It's just, beautiful storytelling here. Absolutely excellent. And remember, all of this is achieved with only a handful of short scenes between the player and Marin. That's just how effectively they managed to do this whole thing. You don't even need that much to get the player to start thinking about these kinds of things. They just did everything right when making this game. And then, of course, this leads down this whole path of thoughts that the player might have while going through the game, after realizing everything is a dream, and that waking the windfish would make Marin disappear. It opens up the door for the player to start having other thoughts, and even doubts and considerations, like, do I really have to wake the windfish? Maybe I can just stay on Koholint Island. Maybe you can just stay in this dream world, like, okay, yeah, none of it's real, but so what? Who cares? As long as you never wake up from the dream, then it's effectively the same thing as being real, so maybe I won't wake the windfish. Maybe I'll just stay here with Marin forever and just be happy that way. And again, nothing leans the player toward thinking these things, but you end up thinking them as you play through the game. It's almost unavoidable. The game doesn't present you with an actual choice here. It's not like you can get to the end of the game and choose not to wake the windfish. So it does present its own correct answer to this question, but in this way, the game kind of explores a theme of escapism. Like, is escapism perhaps a good or bad thing? You know, the player is presented with thoughts about, maybe forget the real world. I don't even care about that. I'm just gonna stay in this little fantasy world that doesn't really exist, and that could be totally fine. Well, the game says, no, that's not fine. You do have to go out into the real world and face reality. As wonderful and lovely as this whole little experience here on Koholint Island is, you can't live your entire life here. This isn't really living. This isn't a real life. Of course, while the game does present that as its answer to this dilemma, there is no correct answer with these kinds of things. It's just something for the player to think about. It opens up this scenario to you and lets you ponder how you feel about the ideas of escapism, which is really cool that the Zelda game actually has, like, a real thing with something that you can actually pull from it. That is extremely rare for this series, and it's very nice to see something like that. It gives Link's Awakening story a little bit more depth to it than a lot of stories that you see in many video games, to be honest, which is why I think it's one of the best stories in all of Zelda. But of course, at the end of the game, you ultimately do wake up the windfish, which means that yes, indeed, Koholint Island, all of its inhabitants, and Marin do end up disappearing, and Link has to say goodbye to them forever. Link is never going to be able to return to Koholint Island. He's never going to see any of those people again, and he is never going to bring Marin with him to go on an adventure to show her the world. None of that is possible. And that is a very melancholy thing. It's a very sad way to end a story. You know, on a more quote-unquote objective level, the game has a happy ending. Link manages to escape from the dream he was trapped in, and he wakes up the windfish, who was trapped by its own nightmares to never awake, so those nightmares would never cease to exist. So, in the action of erasing Koholint Island and Marin from existence, Link was also helping someone. That's another element to the whole thing to consider, is that while maybe this whole lovely dreamlike scenario, you could have stayed there, it would have been at the expense of the windfish. It would have been very morally dubious to allow such a scenario to continue on when you know that it is at the harm of another. And so yes, Link does help the windfish, and it all does end up disappearing, and there's that sad element to it of None of that was real. Marin is gone. She never even really existed in the first place. And this is such a lovely thing that the game captures, that feeling that you get when you have a lovely dream in real life. And it's just this wonderful, extremely happy scenario, and you just want to stay in that dream forever. But eventually you end up waking up, and it's, back to harsh reality. And there is a bit of sadness that comes to you immediately upon waking up that you're like, damn, I really want to just go back to that dream. It's such a strange sadness because it's a sadness for nothing. No tragedy occurred, no one was hurt, it's just this feeling of a wonderful experience that you got to have that is now gone forever. This fleeting little thing that was never even really there. That is a real thing that everyone has felt at some point in their lives in regards to dreams that they've had. I've definitely had dreams like that before, multiple times, of dreams that are just so good that you don't want them to end. And you get that thing when you go to bed the next night where you're like, man, I really hope that I can have that dream again and pick up where I left off and go back to that world because it was just so lovely. But that never actually happens because it was just a dream and you just have to move on from it. And that sadness, that slight little twinge of unfortunate reality, Link's Awakening manages to capture that and bring that to life so extremely well. So many things that deal with dreams often focus on the very surreal elements of dreams, but Link's Awakening focuses on something entirely different that I think is much more powerful, that it focuses on the fleeting nature of dreams and how they can be something really lovely and, by extension, something almost tragic in a way. The beauty of a wonderful dream is reflected in the sorrow that one feels when it ends. And this is what comes back to that theme of escapism from Link's Awakening, is that as unfortunate as it is that that dream wasn't real and that you have to go back to reality, we all have to do that. Eventually, you have to get out of bed and just accept the fact that that dream is over and it's back to the real world. However, Link's Awakening does not just leave it there, it goes a little bit further and leaves things off with a bit more of a positive feeling. In that even if such a lovely dream isn't real, even if Marin isn't real, in a way, she is kind of real, and that dream was, in a way, real. The experiences that Link had there, they may not have been actual things that happened in reality, but they are things that Link experienced. They did happen. Link does remember those events occurring, and so in that way, they are real. And this is manifested beautifully with the Ballad of the Windfish, the song that you use to wake up the Windfish and escape from this dream. That song is taught to the player by Marin. And so the thing that enabled Link to awake from this dream is something that originated from this dream, is something that was not actually real. And yet, despite the fact that apparently Marin wasn't real, the song that Marin taught him was. Link can still remember that beyond the dream. So how can someone not be real if Link has memories of them and has gained knowledge that did not exist before he fell asleep? Marin says that at one point earlier in the story, never to forget this song or her. And that is exactly right. As long as Link remembers the Ballad of the Windfish, then Marin is real and does exist in his heart. The memories and experiences of the adventure he had on Koholint Island, while maybe not things that actually happened, they are just as real as anything else, and that is such a lovely final little note to leave the story of Link's Awakening on. Pulling things back to the theme of escapism, what I take from Link's Awakening is a message that, as great as escapism can be, it is no substitute for living a real life. However, while the things that happen in escapism may not be real, the experience of the escapism itself is real, and it's something that you can take with you, and it can matter. So just as the experience of getting to meet Marin was something very valuable to Link, the experience of playing Link's Awakening is something that is very valuable to us. What a beautiful little story for such a small little game that has relatively little storytelling to it. Holy shit, my guy, this is so incredibly good. I would go as far as to say that this is pretty much a flawless story. Like, every single thing about it works exactly how it's supposed to, and it results in a really effective, really tiny little story that is really engaging. And it's a great use of the video game medium for storytelling. It really does take advantage of the fact that this is a video game to tell the story in such a way that you couldn't through other mediums that makes it even more effective. Like, damn bro, why did they go so hard with the story of this frickin' Game Boy game? Like, pretty much no other Zelda game has a story with this much stuff going on. As someone whose first experience with Link's Awakening was the Switch remake, I had heard from multiple people how good the story of Link's Awakening was, but finally getting to experience it for myself, I was totally blown away. Like, my god, dude. This is just so goddamn good. I don't even really have that much to say about it. It really just speaks for itself. So I guess I'll just stop yammering on and leave my final thoughts for this game's story at wow. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.